you mentioned that he wasn't going to hire an assistant, the never coach. Why is that his philosophy?
I don't know. It's a comfort thing with him, I think. I don't know. He hasn't even really hired that many coaches the closest he's done to hiring a guy like that is Chan Gailey. Mm-hmm. But Chan Gailey did have head coaching experience in the Europe League, in college football, so he did have some head coaching experience. But that's the closest he's ever come to doing that. I just think it's a comfort thing with him that he wants either guys that he feels like he can do it, that he's been around, that and those haven't always worked out, as we all know, with the Dave Campo and Jason Garrett, and that, they didn't work out quite the way he wanted them to work out. And certainly Cowboys fans hope this one works out better than some of those others.
Charean Williams from Pro Football Talk, Mother Football, as Randy Galloway has referred to her, joins us here on 105 through the Fan. So we're talking about Schottenheimer, and a big thing with Schotty every single time he stands up there and talks, not so much yesterday, oddly enough, but he's really driven home the whole culture thing, and that's been a big underlying point. The Cowboys talking about how much that's important to them. Is that what feels like was missing from this football team? Was it not a talent issue? Was it not? Do you think it was more just operating within the bounds of what it means to be the Cowboys?
I don't think you can say it wasn't a talent issue. I mean, the talent, when you go out in the first wave of free agency, Royce Freeman and Eric Kendricks were your two signees. I mean, there was a talent issue missing, and hopefully they address that this year. They have drafted very well, as we know, for the most part, over the last few years. They've gotten some starters out of that, and they've given guys second contracts, and all that's good. But you still have to use free agency. But, yeah, the culture's going to help. If that was a problem last year, if you improve your culture, and that's part of why I think Brian Schottenheimer's here, is the players, including Dak Prescott, stepped up, and especially the offensive players really like this guy.
What was the first year you covered the Cowboys?
I came in the middle of the 99 season.
99, okay. So, I mean, you've spent a lot of time around Cowboys HQ and how it operates and how different it is from everywhere else. Is that overrated at all, that discussion point that people talk about, the idea of it's so different here, you need to have different mentality, or do you buy into, no, that's a real factor that if you are not mentally prepared for what Dallas means, you are not going to have success here?
Oh, I think it's a real thing. I think there is something to be said for that. It's different than other places. It is. I mean, and you have to be able to deal with some of those things that you don't deal with at other places that have been well reported. A lot of things you have to deal with. And it is America's team. The spotlight is always on you, always. In a place like Green Bay or Jacksonville or somewhere else, it's not like, even Kansas City, it's not like that, and
fill in the blank for me. Cowboy fans should feel what right now?
I think more optimistic than they probably were at the end of the season.
Okay, that's good.
Than when the offseason started and they're changing coaches. I think Schottenheimer has given you reason to be a little more excited about what the future holds. Now, Florio asked me a couple days ago on the show if I bought into them being selectively aggressive in free agency. I said no. Like, words are fine, but you said last year you were all in. Jerry said it repeatedly, and they weren't all in. So you can say the words all you want. Until I see it, I'm not going to believe it. So I'm a little more optimistic than the end of last season, but I'm going to have to see it in free agency. And if you don't do anything in free agency, going back to the talent issue, you're not going to be any better than you were last year.
Can you show your necklace to the fan cam there?
Oh, my little.
I've been looking at it.
Kendra Scott football. Yeah.
Very impressive.
Wow. I didn't know she had a football line.
Yeah.
Very impressive. Do you think Osa's about to be done?
Yeah, I think they'll re-sign him, and I think that's important. They let all those guys walk away last year. That was part of it, too, not just signing the two guys they signed, but letting all those guys walk away. And you kept turning on playoff games, and, here's so-and-so making a sack, and here's so-and-so making it, and you're like, Cowboys could have had all these guys. All they had to do was re-sign him, and they didn't do that. I think it's very important that they re-sign him. I think they will re-sign him.
Why isn't Darren Woodson in the Hall of Fame yet, Sheree?
Yeah, I presented Darren Woodson this year and disappointed again. He's got 2 years left before he goes in that cesspool that is the seniors thing. And, we got to get him in. And it's convincing the other voters a lot of them young voters who want to see the stats. And the stat he has are tackles, which are not an official stat. And they want to see something more. And a lot of them didn't see him play. But if you watched him play, as I got Jimmy Johnson to tell me, if you watched him play, you saw a Hall of Famer on the field. Those Cowboys defenses, one of the points I made, and people don't realize this, those Cowboys defenses were better than the Cowboys offenses. Mm-hmm. Cowboys offense never ranked number one.
Wow.
Cowboys defense did rank number one a couple times in those early 90s years. And so that defense was legit. And if you look at it, okay, Dion, he was on the 95 team. That's fine. He's in the Hall of Fame. Charles Haley's the only guy really off that defense who's in the Hall of Fame. So you got to have another guy, and who is the guy? The guy's Darren Woodson. We got to get him in the Hall of Fame. We have to figure out some way, and maybe it's using, and I've talked to Darren about this, using Jimmy Johnson and Bill Parcells, who are big fans of his, and Mike Zimmer and some of those guys to call the voters and explain why this guy, you didn't see him play, but here's why he's a Hall of Famer. Forget not having interception numbers. Forget all this other stuff. He changed the game with what he was able to do. That's the player that teams are looking for now. Derwin James, who's listed as a safety, just made second-team All-Pro. I voted for him first-team All-Pro as a nickel cornerback. That was Darren Woodson. He was before his time. Donnie Shell and Nolan Cromwell are the only two guys who had ever done what Darren Woodson did, and now they're looking for the next Darren Woodson. He was a prototype of that.
How close is he? Is it real? Is it like? Do you feel like you just need to sway? Is it a couple people that need to be swayed?
What
are
you
mountain?
doing wrong? Is what he's asking.
Yeah.
No, I'm asking about how far are we from, like, is it just we need a person or two to flip, or is it bigger than that?
Well, the problem that you have is they've changed the way the voting has gone, and so it's harder to get in. We only saw 3 modern-era guys go in this year. So you go to 7. So you go 15, 10, 7. That's the vote. You're down to 7. There's no yes or no vote. You vote for 5 out of that 7, and then whoever gets 80% out of those 5, which it was 3 this year, gets into the Hall of Fame. It may be even harder next year because you've got Drew Brees and Larry Fitzgerald, and Jason Witten's up too, and his chances probably aren't real good as a first ballot because we're putting in less first ballot guys. But it's just going to be harder to get in. Gates was not first ballot. He went second year he got in this year.
So the 90s Cowboys, it seems like they're just wildly underrepresented for a dynasty. Like the Steelers, I mean, everybody from the 70s got in, even the guys that didn't. Yeah. Packers, for crying out loud, everyone's. Why are the Cowboys so underrepresented from the 90s?
And I think some of those guys who went in on the Steelers, it took time before you appreciated really what they did, and some of them went into the seniors pool and came out of that. So I just think it takes some time to appreciate what this 90s teams did. But hopefully some of these younger voters see.
All right, you're triggering me. You're triggering me.
But Darren Woodson should be the next one off the 90s teams to go in. But there are other guys we could obviously consider as well.
Charean Williams here on 105 through the Fan. When you say younger voters, what age range are we talking, and how are they catching up on the old school players? What is the expectation on them to get familiar with Darren Woodson? Are they going on freaking YouTube? Like, what are we doing? What are we doing here?
Well, that's what they should be doing. I mean, the Cowboys sent out the all blue or whatever it's called documentary they did on Darren Woodson. They sent that out. They should have watched that. It was very good. I rewatched it before I wrote my presentation for Darren Woodson, and then just some of the facts, the fact sheet that Scott Agolnik sent out from the Cowboys. If you just look at the fact sheet, if you just want to do it real quick and look at that fact sheet told you all you needed to know. But again, I think it may be a phone. Maybe we can use Jimmy Johnson and Bill Parcells and some of those guys to call voters. You're not going to call 49 voters, but pick out 20 voters, and let's split them up and have those coaches call us. Here's why Darren Woodson is a Hall of Famer. Because I can say Jimmy Johnson said this, I can say Bill Parcells said this, and I did that, but it's way more impactful if Bill Parcells and Jimmy Johnson call those guys and talk to them.
We're all fascinated with the process, so can you paint the picture for us and all of our listeners of walking into the room?
It's Zoom now, right?
It's on Zoom.
It's on Zoom. The presentation, how long is it? How many people? How long does it take? Because we want to broadcast this thing.
49 voters, all on Zoom. So you have a 5-minute presentation, and you make your 5-minute presentation, and then other people raise their hand, and they call on them. So, for instance, I made the 5-minute presentation. Calvin Watkins talked. Rick Goslin talked. obviously other Dallas voters. And then it was opened up to the room, and some other people talked. And you want the conversation. You don't want it to be too long, like Eli's went on like 40 some odd. You knew at that point.
40?
Like 45 minutes, I think, was Eli's debate. That's too long. But you also, I remember the year Larry Allen was up. There was another guard up, and no one said one thing after the presentation, and that's a dead giveaway that your guy's not getting in. So we had enough people speak up, and it went long enough that you're like, okay, he's got a shot, but it didn't go too long where you said, okay, there's too many people against him. I don't think anybody has a problem with Darren. Like, there's no, like Eli, you point to the 117 record, the times he led the league in intercept, all those things. Like, there's none of that. His passer rating. There's none of that with Darren Woodson. We're not getting people pushing back saying, well, but they don't see it. Like, there's nothing there for them to see unless, like you said, you're watching film or talking to Jimmy Johnson. And
did you vote for Eli?
Well, we're not really allowed to say, but let me just say that Eli did not make it, and it was a hearty debate. And what I don't know is, were people just against him because he was first ballot guy?
Okay, let's talk about that. We have a problem with that, where it's like, do you differentiate a first ballot person from a fourth ballot?
I do, only because I think first ballot guys, this was Emmitt Smith's presentation from Rick Goslin. Ladies and gentlemen, I present Emmitt Smith, the NFL's all-time leading rusher. Thank you very much. And there's applause, and that's it. That, to me, differentiates a guy who doesn't need the debate.
It's your way of giving them their own wing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it's that upper echelon that Deion's talked about. I do think there's an upper echelon. I do think but now you can't turn back time and take out a Jason Taylor, or take out some of these guys who've gone in who you would not put in that upper echelon. I mean, there are many guys who've gone in first ballot who, if you're talking about the upper echelon, are not upper echelon.